Tom, what do you got for us there, man, on that one?
Well, I mean, I'm sure, we have internal and external kind of defining moments. External is like what happens in the world that helps you go through this door that opens.
Something happens to you. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Some situation. But then you have all the internal stuff, which is stuff that you go through and you develop internally. You overcome some of your problems. Like I have, and I can think about myself as I was maturing. I had a decent amount of problems that I had to really overcome for me to become better. So there's moments where that happened, right? But, I think very similar, I was extremely, I don't know. I don't want to say just an asshole, but I like to fight.
Let's call it what it is.
I like to fight. I like to, I was probably on my way to being, dead in an alley somewhere or in prison or doing, like I was very out of control when I was a 20-year-old kid, and I was young, strong, wrestled my whole life, boxed. And so I was just ready to just knock people's teeth out. And I got jobs as bouncers. That's all I did was I just would go around and I would bounce at like whatever bars I knew I could fight in a lot. And if there were no fights or if the bar like kind of like slowed down, because the bouncer at that bar will absolutely crush you if you get in a fight there. And then pretty soon you're just checking IDs all night. And I'm like, I quit. And the owner,
you ruined it for yourself.
The owner would be like, "What? What do you mean?"
You ruined it
I'm
for
like,
yourself.
"There's no fights here. I'm not staying here." But that's not a good way to go through life. I mean, it's like if you want to do that for a couple of years,
yeah, weird.
It's bad, right?
Weird, man.
So, a friend of mine who I was bouncing with, and he was constantly trying to calm me down because he was much more sane about stuff. His name's Colin Ryan. He was like, we wrestled together in high school and we came up together. And he said, hey, I'm going to do some martial art training. And I was like, that's bullshit stuff. That doesn't work. I've beaten down 100 guys who tell me they have black belts and you just smash them in the back alley. And it just, you just punch them in the face. They don't do anything. And I think for the most part, that's true. Like, I was not a big fan of martial artists. To me, martial artists were guys who thought they knew how to fight, but had never been in a fight or something along those lines. And, but he wanted to go do it. And he said, come on, you're coming with me. We're going to go do this training. I was like, all right, I'll come with you. And so we went there and we met a bunch of martial artists. It was great. I still was like, hey, these guys can't really fight, but if you want to do this, like, we'll do your Kung Fu. And, but then going down the road and looking and meeting more people and diving deeper into martial arts, you find out that there's a whole layer of actually really proficient, competent people. Mm-hmm. Not on the surface necessarily, like not every strip mall karate place that you walk into, they're selling black belts or whatever, but there is a world under there that you can find. So eventually we found ended up being my lifelong teacher, Christopher Syok. And he runs the Syok system. But if I wouldn't have found him, man, my whole life would have been, it would have been short and ugly, for the most part. He calmed me down. He got me thinking right. He had me focus my energy on something that was going to be productive. And he really kind of steered me in the right direction. So I think that was like the number one thing for me. If I don't find him, like, man, I don't even have a family right now. Like, I don't have kids. I don't have a wife, So that was a big deal, right? Yep. I started training with him, and it was like I just would take all the money that I would make, a little bit that I was making, like as a bouncer or whatever, and I would put it all into my training, and I would travel to wherever he was, and we would train. And eventually, after years, I said, because I had always wanted to go in, like I looked up to the military guys, but I was so messed up as a kid, like the military would not take me, right? They were like, you're
a problem.
You barely graduated high school. You're half a retard. You're getting, in trouble all like,
Thanks, but
we're not in
thanks.
a war right now. We really don't need you, right? Like, so it was kind of like, it was more selective back then, And so I kind of felt like maybe I missed that boat. And I had trained with my instructor, the head of the SIAC system, met a bunch of guys. And then I eventually came to him because we ended up eventually becoming teachers. But I said, I'd really like to train military guys, like how to use blades. And he was like, okay. I was like, yep. So that's the thing I want to do. He was like, okay. I was like, so now what? He goes, figure it out. What do you mean? I was like, no, but like, aren't you gonna like
Tell me what to do, coach.
Give me a number, someone for me to call. He's like, figure it out. So I was like, okay. And so that set me down that path. And, I was doing all kinds of training. At that point, knowledge, I had learned that knowledge was the thing. Obtain knowledge. However you can, obtain knowledge.
Yes.
And so I was after everything. I was learning shooting with people. I was learning like man tracking and wilderness survival. And I was like going to like all of these different schools. Anything I could get my hands on, I was learning. And I was at a tracking school. And at the tracking school were a bunch of SEALs who were also doing that. And so we just got to talking. And they were like, hey, what do you do? And I was like, I'm a martial artist. And they're like, cool. Show us what you do. And I guess they want me to do a kata or something. So I just like grabbed some training blades, started working templates, clearing hands, cutting throats. And they were like, yep.
We want more of that.
Yeah, let's do some of that.
That's cool.
And, we end up being like under the moonlight in the woods at this tracking school.
That's a cool story.
Doing it.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, why don't you come down to Virginia Beach? I was like, great, when do you want me there?
Yeah.
And, I'm not getting paid for anything. Everything is like out of my pocket.
Yeah.
So I'm going down and sleeping on people's floors and we're training. By the way, I found guys who trained like we train. I was a wrestler. We trained hard. And what I thought is like most guys that say they do martial arts, they don't really train that hard. They train like 1 hour or 2 hours. And they don't even like hardly break a sweat in most cases. But some guys train like serious trainer, like they will grind it out. And SEALs will be like, they'll just like, hey, we're off today. We're training for 9 hours. Like, I'm like, okay, let's do this. Tearing apart like the inside of their apartment, throwing knives through walls. And like, they took down they rented an apartment down there and they had an overhead fan, a ceiling fan. They took it down and so they could hang a heavy bag from where it was. Of course, the landlord was
From
like,
the fixture?
Yeah, it was like crazy. Right. The whole place was destroyed. But I ended up becoming close with those guys and they liked the training. And this was like maybe 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there. And so that went on for a few years. And that was a key thing. Like meeting those guys, doing that was a big thing. And then 9/11 happened and they were like, come on, we're doing stuff,